So I guess the first question that I have for you is what kind of conversations did you have with Ron about the main titles? Just because I feel like I don't remember the last time that I saw a main title design. I mean, I knew I was gonna like the show. I'm like obnoxiously gay, so I was like, I know I'm gonna like the show. This, that, and the other. But when I watched the main titles for the first time, I was like, this, I know exactly what the tone of the show is just
Right.
from that. And I guess I just wanted to know like what some preliminary conversations you guys had were.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that got sent through was kind of like the promo package material that they had put together, I guess, for their pitch
Mm.
into us. Um, and then from there, we kind of did our thing where we just take that information and break it down into kind of components and start thinking about it, noodling about it,
Mm.
and then kind of found the central themes, did a bunch of research, and then kind of did a sort of a soft sort of initial treatment for them, kind of what our thoughts were.
Sure.
And it seemed to kind of hit the mark.
Mm.
And at that point, that's when we jumped on a call with Ron and Dan, EP as
Mm.
well, and kind of presented that. And they really kind of like the themes. And so from there, they're just like, yeah, okay, explore that. And so we just went and explored a lot of that. And really it was quite they were quite open with us kind of just kind of playing with it and exploring on our own based off of those sort of central themes.
Okay.
And then really it wasn't until we had done some work, kind of ran into some gotchas and stuff when it came to the actual sourcing the materials and everything, that Ron really came back in as well once he was, he had his hands full like on the actual show
Yeah.
and getting it out.
Sure.
So, when he came back and he was able to kind of put some of that to bed and come back to the titles, we really started to flush things out too. So, and he was a big help and sort of kind of bringing it home too. So
Yeah. Okay.
he definitely knows what he wants, right? So like he had a very
Yeah.
clear um vision, I think, for the whole show and every detail of it. So yeah, it was great to be a part of it.
Okay. Um, I was curious about I don't say the structure of this. I feel like when I speak to people who are involved with main title design, I like to talk about movement and the way that this thing moves. I mean, we're seeing very quickly image upon image upon image, but it sort of reminded me of like a what's it called? Like a case file or a
Yeah.
history book. And I felt like maybe because it was coupled with the music that I love so much,
Hmm.
um, there's a real sort of I don't want to say treacherous, but there's like a real sort of like alarming thing that I feel like the visuals and the music when they're married together really work pretty beautifully. So I guess I wanted to know about movement of like the compilation of images. If you could talk to me a
Hmm.
little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I would say that the audio is amazing in it too.
Yeah.
So that's that really always helps. It's
Hmm.
like often um, in this type of work, it's like I don't want to say an afterthought, but they're kind of like the last people to get their hands on things. And
Hmm.
it's so important. I'm always quite surprised at how that process works, honestly,
Yeah.
because you almost hear it before you see it. So like,
Hmm.
it's like as soon as you heard the plucking, like the ding, ding, you knew that
Hmm.
you're in it. So, um, a lot of the conversations and figuring this out was kind of finding the balance of that like governmental espionage. Like Ron always said, this is sort of like this is a show about danger. It's also a show about love, and it's a show about sex, and it's a show
Hmm.
about excitement, and so it was like our sort of initial draw was towards that sort of McCarthy danger type of thing. It was, I tend to skew like a little a little darker in like the tonality of the stuff I like to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we had that. We had gotten that down. Knowing the script, like we got early cuts and we got the scripts and we were able to read it. And there's so much visual language around that period, like that
Yeah.
50s McCarthyism and all that kind of stuff. And there's tons of sort of draw that we can pull from, the redacted and
Mhm.
but we also wanted to bring in, this, I mean, it's a historical drama. So, and I think I've said before, there was unfortunately no shortage of material as far as like newspaper clippings and things that kind
Yeah.
of talked about the Lavender Scare and all that. So, um, we had no shortage of things to pull from. And really, a lot of this became editorial, uh, primarily. Like right off the top, it was just like, how do we find the right balance between this very human story about these two people or people in general, and I think there was a really early conversation about, do we include cast members, like their actual,
Mm, yeah.
whether it's like sort of b-roll or shots of them within it, or do we want to keep it completely separate? And I think we all sort of agreed that keeping it separate was the way to go, because then it talked about the greater sort of tone and mood and all
Yeah.
that had the show's themes involved in it. And so it was really, like I said, an editorial process at the beginning of finding the right balance between all those little elements, going through tons and tons of materials, and then bringing in sort of like like more risque sexual stuff and as kind of just to pump it all up and bring that excitement and that Ron wanted to really kind of drive home as well. So,
Yeah, I would say the sort of like salacious stuff. I was like, I shouldn't bring that up, but then I rewatched the credits again. Then I was like, I have to say, well, I was about to say ballsy, but I guess that's, but the title comes up on like a denim crotch,
oh
so
yeah.
I was like, all right, fellow travelers is not fucking around. Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was pretty unapologetic and like, and it's very, very um not very many times in my career do I get to work with decision makers who are just like, no, no, dial it up, don't dial it down. So
yeah,
it's kind of a great situation, where Ron's just like, yeah, yeah, no, that's that, more of that, and I'm like, huh? This much, that much,
yeah.
so that was a great process.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that yeah, I mean that even just indicates to me like, a team of people that know exactly what they want and they're
totally,
just like this is
totally,
like when by the time that we see a guy like rubbing another guy's chest, I was like, all right, here we
yeah,
go.
I'm in.
Here we go.
But
Um
it's funny because it kind of sucks people in from all sort of ends of it, like the melodrama, like
mhm.
all of it. Like there's just, it pulls from a lot of different angles, and I think that's why, like, once you get into the show and it's so um beautifully shot and it's gorgeous, and it's
Yeah.
it's kind of this nice sort of contrast.
Yeah, there's something about the show as a whole that I'm realizing as I'm talking to, the all the artists involved with it.
Yeah.
It's just that um e- everything is so beautifully layered and textured. It's sort of like sort of talking about the music, like I can hear a theme of Hawk while something gentler is playing, while at the same time you have I don't know the redacted like black lines. So I don't it sounds so cheesy, but it kind of like it really freaks me out when you hear it, especially with the score with the whole sequence put together. And there's something about how even that on top of these really sort of forbidden beautiful images of like period love that really like
Hmm.
is really sort of encapsulate the essence of like how textured and layered and complicated everything is.
Yeah, yeah, and that was by design for sure.
Yeah.
It's such a layered story. It's
Yeah.
you've got, layer upon layer upon layer with all these people and our protagonists and who they have to pretend to be and their masks and all of those layers and then the fear, but also the excitement and the love and the danger, like all of that, and very real, like very high stakes,
Hmm.
consequential stuff, and so that, the idea of like keeping it kind of really human and organic and kind of unslick, and kind of making it very tactile was
Yeah.
always like, right from the very first frame that we designed was that was it. And and then playing around again with like, half tones and which helped kind of like set the period tone for it.
Yeah.
And we had this idea of like of changing it up as we go along. So the idea that, it starts sort of 50s with newspaper, and then as we go it gets into kind of more of like almost a video type of, to kind of get into the 80s and sort
Yeah.
of playing around with a little bit of like that tracking and that sort of visual language. So just subtly sort of like underneath it that kind of helps us carry it through. So
Yeah, it's sort of like that's something I wanted to ask about because I love how um I mean if you look at the main title sequence, the sequence itself can just be like a history lesson. And it's
mm,
sort of and just thinking of not just the images that they're looking at, but the I keep saying texture, but I mean like the you could see maybe like the black and white granules of an old photograph, but then maybe 10 seconds later, there could be like gloss to a photograph or gloss of
mm,
like I think of like video cassette like tape.
mhm,
And,
yeah.
and it's sort of like I realized that I was sort of responding to that because I've seen the show like 2.5 times now, that every time that I watch, I was like, oh, that's why I like it so much, is because it also reinforces like the main thesis of the whole show is that uh gay liberation has taken like so long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. Yeah, and not and like and hard fought, right?
Oh yeah.
From beginning to end. So um yeah, totally. And like it's easy, I mean, when you watch the show, obviously, you find out about like Cohn and McCarthy. I
Uh-huh.
mean, we all know about McCarthy, but like Cohn a little bit less in history, but he's the real, baddie. He really, as we go through it. And like um if you want me to swear on this thing.
Oh, go right ahead.
Okay. Like an asshole. So, as you're going through it, you're just, you're kind of like I mean, this whole process honestly was a history lesson for me, totally,
Hmm.
I mean, I had known pieces of this, coming sort of from like an art background and kind of being exposed to like from like an art history point of view,
Right.
the Red Scare and the censorship, but clear, but not, but the Lavender Scare and all that. And again, I knew pieces of that, but not to, this whole like, and to see it kind of unfold. And as we're kind of going through all the materials and the, you know, the craziness that was there and how serious it was. I mean, people were executed for, you know,
Yeah.
espionage and treason and lives were ruined like constantly all the time. And I've listened to like great interviews and uh, presentations from Ron speaking about the subject matter, and it's just it's yeah, it's intense. So definitely felt that.
Yeah, there's something about there was a younger gay person that I know in my like social circle, and he was telling me that he's just like, oh, I'm about like 2 episodes in, and that one guy, that we I think he said like that Weasley guy, and I was like, you mean Roy Cohn? And he was like, yeah, I don't like him. I've never heard of that guy. And I was like, oh, good God, like you
Yeah,
like I sort of wanted to like just slide a copy of like Angels in America across to him because
Yeah, right.
I was stuff like that, and it was just like, okay, so uh, I mean, me gushing again, that the thing I love about the show is that it's consciously and subconsciously teaches us, and I think the main title design is a really great tool because it taps into an emotional thing of us seeing that forbidden love thing and sort of want to
Mm,
makes us want to like dive into something a little bit more informative, I guess.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Um, I guess just one last comment before I let you go is, you were mentioning not wanting to, or maybe discussing not putting images from the show into the main title design. But I
Hmm.
did want to say there was, I think, a half second of the guy that Matt Bomer sees across the way, like lighting a cigarette in a cloud of smoke.
Yeah,
And that image terrifies me.
yeah,
I mean I know why, but it's also for some reason every time I see it in the main title design, I'm like, ugh, like I have like a verbal loud reaction to
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, it feels real, but like it feels
Yeah. Feels like a
current, like
documentary
it feels
snapshot.
now, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Ugh.
yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting process. It took us a while because once we did the initial design and we kind of like the path, then we kind of had this added challenge of securing the material. So we had done a lot of design with sort of proxy images
Mhm.
and material. And then, the reality of sourcing a lot of this stuff was, difficult. And, the producers, you know, were amazing and fought for it. And they're like, no, no, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna grab this. We don't want to because it's like, oh, do we kind of remake some stuff or do we,
Yeah.
we add some things in because it's a long title sequence and we had to fill it up with and so the more this particular concept depended on a lot of material on a lot of layers,
Mhm.
and so there was a lot of discussion about how we did that, and those guys totally stepped up and just like, here, take like get what you need, and then sourced all the salacious stuff as well. So there's oodles of that available right now. So yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting process to get to the final thing, and then the audio was incredibly helpful for us to cut to, and yeah.
Well, actually, I said one last comment, but now that made
Sure.
me. Uh, so how much editing did you guys have to do after you got the music? Like, did that sort of help any sort of I said treacherous before, but that like that sort of
Mhm.
does that help with like the danger aspect of like editing to make something look more dangerous?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of I'm all blurry for some reason. I don't know. There we go. Focus. There we
Oh, there you
go. There we
are.
go. Yeah, there was definitely like passes of it,
Yeah.
so we did a lot of passes. Once the audio changed a couple times, went from I would say more melodic in the when the like the violins start kicking in and they sort of crescendo towards the end. It happened a little sooner, and so there wasn't as much of a buildup, and then they
Yeah.
that came to us, and so there was a little bit of crafting that had to happen. Like once we got that, it was like, honestly, it was like right to the end. We were just it was very um you know uh like on the fly. We're kind of moving. I was really working on it until like the last second possible. Um, all the redaction and stuff was actually like we did it by hand and scanned
Oh,
all that stuff
wow.
in so that it was all done by, so it felt organic and we could kind of customize those elements. And same with the half dot patterns and stuff. We'd blow things up and scan them in and bring them in as elements and be able to edit with those as well. So we tried to kind of like bring, you know, practical effects to it, even though it was,
Oh,
composited digitally, but we wanted to,
yeah.
bring those methods to it. So that was a lot of fun. I mean, the whole thing was incredibly fun, like,
Well,
you don't
that
get.
makes it, yeah, the whole, like, if you do it by hand, like, I don't know, there's something about you see those pages with redacted lines, you think automatically of somebody doing it. So the
Mhm.
fact that that is sort of a tactile thing that you guys got to put in, that's really cool.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was cool. Yeah, and in colorizing some of the black and white stuff was pretty interesting too.
Yeah.
That was an interesting thing to kind of make it feel, to bring it out of just the history and bring it into
Mm-hmm.
now, but with images that are, riots and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
colorizing them to make them feel like current is, I thought was a fun thing to do. So lots of techniques being used.
Yeah. God, I could probably talk to you about this for an hour, even though it's like 45 seconds, a minute long. And it's like, oh goodness. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ron.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Again, I will be obnoxious this whole season. So if you ever need someone to talk you up about the work, I will be the fellow traveler's cheerleader. So
Amazing. I love it.
yeah,
Thanks so much. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah. Thanks so much for your time. Have a good rest of your day and good luck to you this
Yeah,
season.
likewise. All right,
Yeah,
take care.
bye.
Bye.